The chandelier above their heads sparkled like this was a celebration, not an ambush. Every chair at the long dining table was filled. Dad at the head, smug in his tailored suit. My uncles, arms crossed like security guards. My aunt, pretending to sip tea while watching me like a hawk. And my cousin Dana? She couldn't even meet my eyes. I walked in slowly, bag over my shoulder, hair tied back, calm as a surgeon. My name is Raina Carter, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever walked into a room where every smile was a weapon and every hug meant war? Dad stood up. Raina, we're so glad you could make it.
Lies.
He wasn't glad. He was greedy. On the table were 3 folders. One already open. Legal papers, inheritance, transfer forms, every clause written to strip me clean of what my mother left me. $2.4 million. Held in a trust. In my name. And they wanted it. All of it. We just want what's fair, Dad said, sliding the papers toward me. You're young. You don't need that kind of pressure. We'll manage it for you. Manage.
Control. Spend.
Erase. He gestured toward the corner. 2 lawyers in suits too polished to blink. They've already drawn up the transfer. All you need to do is sign. I sat down, took one long breath, then smiled. Funny, I said softly, pulling out my phone, because I brought someone too. The room shifted. Faces tightened. Dad's lips curled into confusion. From the hallway came the soft click of heels. Then a woman in black stepped into view. Eyes sharp, briefcase in hand. Good afternoon, she said. My name is Vanessa Grant. I represent Ms. Carter. Dad blinked. You brought a lawyer? Vanessa laid out a binder. Actually, I'm not just her lawyer. I'm the executor of her mother's true will. The one that states Raina is to retain full control of the inheritance and be legally shielded from family coercion. My cousin Dana gasped. One uncle stood up. But me? I leaned back in the chair and whispered. You didn't invite me to a meeting. You invited me to a robbery. You just didn't expect I'd show up with the cops. The silence after Vanessa spoke felt like a power outage. No one breathed. No one blinked. Just that sharp, sudden collapse of control. Dad tried first, laughing like this was all a misunderstanding. Raina, honey, we were just trying to help. You've never handled that kind of money before. Your mother knew that. Vanessa didn't flinch. She opened the binder, flipped to a notarized page, and slid it across the table. Correction, she said. Your late wife knew exactly who she was raising, and she made sure your hands would never touch a cent of her daughter's legacy. His face dropped. Panic, poorly hidden beneath smug layers. One uncle leaned over to read it, but Vanessa covered the page. You're not named anywhere. In fact, Ms. Carter's mother specifically added a clause. Should any party attempt to manipulate or pressure my daughter into relinquishing her inheritance, that party will be disqualified from receiving any future estate funds. I looked at Dad, right into his eyes. You invited me here thinking I was stupid. You surrounded me with suits and blood and assumed I'd crack. But I'm not the girl you used to corner in the hallway. I'm the woman Mom raised to finish the game. His voice turned desperate. You don't understand what this money could do for the family. I tilted my head. You mean the family that left me to grieve alone? The family that mocked Mom behind her back, called her a gold digger when she got sick, and disappeared when the hospital bills started stacking? The lawyer on his left tried to speak. Vanessa cut him off. You'll want to stop now. Because if you continue, we'll be filing a protective court injunction before the hour is over. And trust me, there are press outlets that love stories like this. That's when my aunt stood up, hands shaking. You're tearing the family apart, Raina. I stood too.
Calm. No.
You tore it apart. I'm just refusing to rebuild it with stolen bricks. And with that, I picked up the folder. Vanessa nodded once. And we walked out, heels clicking like a metronome marking the death of their plan. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't throw a scene. But when that door closed behind me, it was the sound of a dynasty collapsing from within. They didn't go quiet. Of course they didn't. When power is all someone knows, they treat boundaries like betrayal. By the time I got home, my phone was vibrating off the table. Voicemails, text messages, emails titled, "Let's be civil. You misunderstood the meeting. Don't do something you'll regret." Regret? I regret giving them the benefit of the doubt. They weren't trying to guide me. They were trying to gut me. Politely, legally, with smiles and contracts they hoped I wouldn't read. But my mother raised me with sharper eyes than they counted on. She left me more than money. She left me armor. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I created a new email, BCC'd every family member who sat at that ambush table. Subject: Inheritance misconduct and final statement. Dear family, I am no longer available for manipulation. If any of you attempt to contact me, my lawyer will respond, not me. You are not entitled to what my mother entrusted to me. If you believed silence meant weakness, consider this your correction. We are not at war. We are just no longer in business. I pressed send, closed the laptop, and felt something shift, not just in my body, but in my lineage. Because for generations, women in our family were expected to submit, to hand over, to be grateful for scraps, even when they built the table. But not me. Not anymore. The next morning, my aunt posted a vague quote on Facebook. "Money changes people." I smiled. Because it does. But not in the way they think. It didn't turn me cold. It turned me clear. I wasn't the traitor. I was the first in a line of women who refused to let love be bought and respect be borrowed. Let them post. Let them sulk. Let them stew in the silence they created. I wasn't climbing their ladder anymore. I was building my own foundation. From truth. From steel. From every time they underestimated me. They didn't just crawl back into silence. They regrouped, like vultures around a different carcass. Only this time, they aimed for something louder, a lawsuit. 3 weeks after I sent that final email, a thick envelope landed on my doorstep. Certified. Stamped. Heavy, like it already knew it was a joke. Inside, a legal petition, filed by my father, with my uncle's signature below, seeking rightful redistribution of inherited funds on the basis of family contribution and verbal agreement with deceased party. Verbal agreement. No proof. No logic. Just desperation dressed in a suit. Vanessa called me before I could even finish reading. She was calm, almost amused. They really thought a court would honor hearsay over a notarized, bulletproof will? I laughed. I guess they missed the days I was too scared to speak. We drafted a response that afternoon. Included bank statements, email records, and copies of Mom's original letter to me. The one she wrote 6 months before she passed. Don't let them take this from you. You earned it when you stood by me. When they vanished, you stayed. This is not a gift. It's what's owed. The letter was written in her hand, dated, witnessed, framed on my bedroom wall, but now part of Exhibit A. The hearing was scheduled. They came in with 3 lawyers. Suits sharp, shoes louder than their arguments. We came in with facts, silence, strategy. The judge didn't even need an hour. There is no evidence that the deceased promised or intended for the inheritance to be divided. The court recognizes the validity of the original will. Motion denied. Dad didn't look at me once. My uncle muttered something under his breath. The others just filed out. The way cowards always do when truth doesn't play along. Vanessa packed up the files, handed me the last folder, and smiled. This wasn't just a win, Reina. This was a line in the blood. And they know now. You don't cross it. I walked out of that courtroom, lighter than I had in years. Not because I kept the money, but because I kept my spine. They wanted the courtroom to be my cage. It became my throne instead. The morning after the court hearing, I opened Mom's safety deposit box. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Not out of fear, but because some grief takes time to grow the hands needed to hold it. The key had been hanging on my dresser mirror for a year, polished from how often I stared at it, hesitated, then walked away.
But now?
Now I was ready. The bank clerk led me to a private room. Metal box. Cold. My mother's handwriting on the outside. For Raina, when they show you who they really are. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a folder, a velvet pouch, and a flash drive labeled Truth. The folder? Letters. Mom had written one to each of them. Dad, my uncles, even Dana. Every page detailed the lies, the abandonment, the quiet cruelty they thought I didn't remember. She wrote it all down.
Dates.
Incidents. Quotes I forgot. But she never did. And in her letter to me, tucked at the bottom, pages folded like a secret hug, she wrote, "Don't fight with noise. Win with light. Let the truth be your sword, but never your shield. You were never meant to hide behind anything." I wept, not because I was hurt, but because I finally understood. She wasn't protecting money. She was protecting me from a legacy of silence. The flash drive held videos. Her voice, soft but steady, explaining each financial decision, backing it all with receipts. A digital armory of truth. And the velvet pouch? A ring. Her ring. The one she wore when she won her first court case against a company that tried to bury her. The one she said made her feel invincible. I slipped it on. It fit like it was waiting. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on, and whispered, "They thought the inheritance was the treasure. But you were. And now I get to carry you, with clarity, not grief." I didn't need revenge. I had truth. And she made sure it would never die with her. It wasn't over. Because people like them don't retreat. They rebrand. A week after the court loss, I saw the headlines. Local entrepreneur John Carter launches family initiative honoring late wife's legacy. My mother's name, on a website she never approved. Photos of Dad smiling beside donation boxes. His hand on a checkbook he never opened while she was alive. I stared at the screen in disbelief. He'd stolen her face, twisted her story into a PR mask to rebuild his image, as if love could be marketed, as if guilt could be monetized. The headline made her sound like a trophy, not the warrior who raised me in fire. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I picked up the phone and called Vanessa. File an injunction.
Today.
Trademark her name if we have to. She's not their puppet. By Friday, his website went offline. By Monday, the nonprofit partners quietly pulled out. He tried to call me. Left a voicemail I'll never forget. "Raina, I didn't mean to disrespect her. I just thought maybe we could start over. Maybe we could do something together in her memory." I saved the message. Not for court, but for reminder. Because even now, after everything, he still didn't understand. He didn't want to honor her.
He wanted to use her one last time.
So I wrote him a letter. The last one he'll ever get from me. Asterisk, you didn't lose the money. You lost the woman who made you feel important. And now you've lost her name too. You can't use what you never earned. Her story will be told, but by me, asterisk. Then I did what he feared most. I launched the Carter Truth Foundation. Not for optics. For real women. Real stories. Real scholarships for daughters who were told to stay small.
To smile. To give.
And every application, every newsletter, bears her real signature. In her handwriting. Because her name doesn't live in their headlines anymore. It lives in impact. And every time they Google her, they'll see me, not broken, not bitter, but exactly who she raised me to be. A woman who knows her worth and guards it like a fortress. It started small. One message. Then 5. Then dozens. From women. From daughters. From strangers who saw the foundation. Read the court case transcript. Heard whispers that someone finally said no. My mom left me a small business. My uncle tried to sell it without asking me. I was told to do the right thing and split my inheritance with my brother. He never even visited mom in the hospital. How did you stay so calm? How did you not burn it all down? I answered them all. Not with legal advice, but with what mom gave me. Permission to stop apologizing for surviving. We started weekly calls, then monthly workshops, then a full-blown summit. Daughters of the line. 100 women. In one room. Not fighting for their stories to be heard, but celebrating the fact that we didn't stay silent. I wore Mom's ring on stage, held her letter in my back pocket, and I told them. They said we changed. But what we really did was return to ourselves. We stopped shrinking for people who only loved us small. They clapped. Some cried. Some just closed their eyes like they were breathing for the first time. And that's when I knew this wasn't about inheritance anymore. It never was. It was about being the first woman in a line of many. To choose self over silence. To refuse the hand-me-down guilt. To say, you don't get to hurt me and still get a seat at my table. That night, I received an email. No subject. Just one line. Mom would be proud. It was from Dana. No reply address. No drama. Just those 5 words. And somehow, they didn't feel like betrayal or manipulation. They felt like truth. Like maybe, just maybe, someone else heard the echo of what we lost. I closed my laptop, looked at the city outside my window, and whispered,
She is.
but so am I. Because I wasn't her shadow anymore. I was her voice.
Clear.
Unbent. Unbought. And every girl who heard me was one less woman they'd ever get to silence. I stood at the edge of the field, a wind stirring through the tall grass, sunlight pouring over the marble like a final blessing. The plaque read, "The Eleanor Carter House, a sanctuary for daughters who chose themselves." Underneath, in smaller letters, were Mom's words etched forever. "They'll call you selfish for saving yourself.
Let them.
Walk anyway." The building had once been a courthouse. Now it was a sanctuary, with beds, legal aid, therapy rooms, and walls painted in soft golds and deep greens. Colors she loved. Colors that said, "You're safe now." I cut the ribbon with the same scissors Mom used to open her first business.
Old. Worn.
Still sharp. The crowd clapped. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that feels like a heartbeat.
Real.
Witnessed.
Alive.
Vanessa stood beside me. She leaned in and said, "You know, this will outlive all of them." And I smiled, because that was the point. I never wanted revenge. Not really. I wanted something they could never understand. A legacy untouched by greed. A name that meant protection. Not power. Not possession. Just peace. That evening, I walked the halls alone. Room to room. Soft voices. Laughter. A girl holding her mother's hand. A woman reviewing a lease she finally got approved for. A teenager writing a poem on a notepad with a pink pen. And I felt it. Mom wasn't gone. She was everywhere. Not in lawsuits. Not in dinner table ambushes. Not in the money they tried to take. She lived in the quiet victory of women who stayed. Who fought. Who walked away and built something sacred with the pieces. As I stood under the archway and watched the sunset, I felt no rage. No hunger for apologies. Only this. They tried to steal her name. So I built a world where her name saves others. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's completion. And with that, I exhaled every version of myself that once begged for love. In rooms designed to drain me, I no longer needed their table. I had built my own kingdom, and every woman inside it was heir to something they could never buy.
The music played softly in the background as laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the lavish ballroom. It was her brother's wedding, a day filled with celebration, joy, and family coming together. Emily stood near the back, away from the dance floor, watching her mother float around the room like royalty, and her sister flashing her usual perfect smile. Everything looked perfect. No one could have guessed what was already unraveling beneath the surface. Emily had arrived early that morning with a carefully sealed envelope tucked in her purse. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, a wedding gift she had quietly arranged weeks before. It was never meant for public applause. No spotlight, just love. She had always been that kind of daughter, steady, dependable, invisible in her sacrifices. When others gave wrapped boxes or heartfelt speeches, Emily gave without a word. She remembered the conversation with her mother just a few nights earlier. "You don't have to go big," her mom had said, brushing Emily's concern off with a casual laugh. "You've done enough, honey." But something in her tone that practiced indifference had left a familiar sting. Emily smiled anyway and promised herself this would be her final big gesture, something meaningful to mark a new chapter. Her relationship with her mother had always been tangled. Love mixed with silent expectations. With her sister, it was worse. Kayla had always been the golden girl, fun, loud, charming. Emily, in comparison, was the backup plan, the responsible one who picked up the pieces and paid the bills no one talked about. But today wasn't about comparison. It was about love. So she slipped the envelope to her brother quietly, pulled him into a quick hug and said, "Don't tell anyone. Just use it for something that matters." He looked stunned. She saw tears in his eyes. That moment, so real, so pure, was why she did it. Not for recognition, for family. And for a few hours, Emily allowed herself to feel good. She smiled. She danced. She believed this time, maybe, things would be different. But betrayal has a way of hiding in plain sight, and hers was already waiting in the shadows. It started with a routine check. Just days before the wedding, Emily sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, sipping coffee, going through her banking app like she always did on Sunday mornings. She had always been meticulous about her finances, budgeting, tracking, organizing. So when she saw the numbers didn't add up, her stomach sank. $19,000. Gone. At first, she thought it was a glitch. She refreshed, logged out, logged back in. Nothing changed. The transaction history showed multiple strange withdrawals, all timed closely together over the span of 2 days. Her hands froze over the keyboard. She didn't want to panic, not yet, but a slow, creeping unease wrapped around her like a cold fog. She called the bank. The representative confirmed the transfers were authenticated using her linked email, the one only she and her mother had access to for emergencies. A security measure they'd set up years ago, back when Emily had helped her mom through a financial crisis. Just in case, her mom had said then. We're family. Now, that trust felt like a weapon turned against her. Emily didn't tell anyone. Not right away. She needed to think, needed to be sure. But the signs started appearing fast and loud. Her sister, Kayla, strolled into the rehearsal dinner wearing a designer bag Emily recognized from a catalog she could never justify splurging on. Then came the new gold bracelet, the suspiciously upgraded phone, the casual mention of spa treatments in passing conversation. Emily's heart twisted. Could it be coincidence? Was she being paranoid? But then Kayla let it slip, a careless joke made while toasting cocktails with her cousins. Let's just say I've been having a little unexpected help lately. Right, Mom? Their mother laughed. Not nervously, not apologetically, just amused. Emily sat a few feet away, quietly observing. Her smile was gone. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was calculating, replaying every time she had covered someone's bills. Every time she'd been told she was too serious, too controlling, while they lived carefree lives funded by her silence. It wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal of it all. The audacity, the entitlement, the ease with which they took as if she didn't matter, as if her sacrifices were expected, not appreciated. She didn't explode. She didn't confront. Not yet. Because Emily had learned one thing growing up in that house. Being loud got attention, but being quiet, being patient, that's when you got power. And now she was done being the quiet giver. She was about to become something her mother and sister never expected, the storm they thought would never come. Emily didn't plan to cause a scene. That had never been her style. But after days of watching her sister parade around like royalty and her mother treat her like a background character in her own family, the silence had started to rot inside her. She couldn't sit with it anymore. The wedding was the perfect picture of joy. White roses, twinkling lights, a string quartet humming in the background. People were laughing, clinking champagne glasses, smiling for photos. But Emily's chest felt tight as she spotted her mother and Kayla laughing near the banquet table, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't taken something from her. She walked over, slow and calm. Her voice was steady, but her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Can I talk to you both for a minute?" she asked, motioning toward a quieter corner near the terrace. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Now," she said, already annoyed. Kayla gave a dramatic sigh, but followed. Once they were out of earshot, Emily didn't waste time. She held up her phone, screen lit with the bank statement. "There's money missing from my account. $19,000. Transferred using credentials tied to our shared recovery email." There was a beat of silence. A flicker of something passed across her mother's face, but it vanished so fast it could have been imagined. "What are you saying, Emily?" her mother asked, voice cold and clipped. "I'm asking if you know anything about it," Emily said, choosing her words with painful care. "Because if this is just a mistake—" "A mistake," her mother snapped. Her tone sharpened, drawing Kayla in like fuel to a fire. "Are you accusing me of stealing from you? Is that what this is?" Emily swallowed hard. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm asking." That's when it happened. Her mother's hand came so fast, no one saw it coming. The slap cracked through the air like a whip. Emily's head snapped to the side, and her body stumbled, hitting the terrace wall with a dull thud. The music stopped. Conversations froze. Every pair of eyes turned. Emily stood there, stunned, her cheek burning, tears threatening, but not from pain. From shame, from betrayal, from the cruelty that seemed to live so comfortably in the people she once protected. "You ungrateful brat!" her mother screamed, her voice rising in hysteria. "After everything I've done for you, how dare you accuse me?" Emily looked at her, really looked, and all she saw was someone who never saw her as a daughter, just a resource. And then, through the shocked silence of the party, a new sound echoed through the room. The steady footsteps of her husband, Daniel, rushing forward, his face unreadable. He had arrived just in time. And when their eyes met, Emily's pain turned into something else entirely. A promise that this moment wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Emily stood against the terrace wall, one hand pressed to her burning cheek. Her mother's shout still echoed in her ears, but the silence around her now was deafening. The wedding party had frozen mid-celebration. Glasses halfway raised, laughter half formed, all replaced by stunned disbelief. Then came the sound that shifted the air. Footsteps. Firm. Intentional. Daniel. Her husband didn't run. He didn't shout. He didn't ask questions. He walked through the crowd like someone used to being watched, someone who expected rooms to fall quiet when he entered. And they did. His dark tailored suit looked sharp against the soft wedding lights, but it was his presence, calm, controlled, commanding, that made everyone take a step back. Kayla's smile cracked. Their mother's righteous fury faded into a tight-lipped scowl. Daniel stopped beside Emily and gently touched her elbow. "Are you all right?" he asked, low enough that only she could hear. Emily nodded, but the tears she had fought earlier now shimmered in her eyes. He didn't say another word. He turned, calmly facing her mother and sister. "I heard everything," he said, his voice clear but quiet. "From the driveway." Their mother's jaw tensed. "She accused me of stealing." "And you hit her," Daniel replied, nodding slowly, eyes locked onto hers. "In front of dozens of witnesses." Kayla laughed nervously. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down." Daniel raised a single finger. "No, we're not going to gaslight her. Not this time." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He held it out, and Kayla hesitated before taking it. Her face went pale the moment her eyes scanned the numbers. "What is this?" their mother demanded, reaching for it. "It's a printed transaction history," Daniel said. "The $19,000 transfer? It was traced. The IP address, the recovery email, the linked device, all tied to your shared laptop at home. You didn't even bother using a VPN." The crowd murmured. Whispers rose like smoke. "You had no right," their mother snapped, trembling now, "to snoop through." "It was my wife's account," Daniel cut in sharply. "We're legally married." Her assets are protected under joint marital law. I have full rights to investigate suspicious activity. And I did. Kayla tried to speak, but no words came out. Their mother looked around for support, for sympathy, but the wedding guests weren't making eye contact anymore. No one was coming to her defense. Daniel turned to Emily again. Do you want to press charges? Emily looked at her mother. At Kayla. Their fear was louder than their words now. But she didn't answer yet. I just wanted to be part of this family, she whispered. And you broke that. She took Daniel's hand. Then, for the first time that night, Emily stood tall, not as the daughter, not as the scapegoat, but as someone who finally held power. They had shamed her in public, and now the truth was out just as loudly. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a tablet. With a few taps, the screen lit up, and what he showed wasn't just a single bank transfer. It was a curated timeline of betrayal. Let's begin, he said calmly, plugging the device into the venue's projector. The screen flickered behind the wedding arch. Guests turned, curious, then confused, then stunned. First, a screenshot of the bank transfer. $19,000, gone in one transaction. The timestamp matched exactly the afternoon Emily had been out finalizing wedding plans with the caterer. It had been timed for when she wouldn't notice. Next came the recovery email used to confirm the bank security check, a throwaway account tied to Kayla's old username. Then came chat logs. Daniel had retrieved archived messages from a forgotten family iPad. In them, Kayla messaged their mother. She'll never notice. She's too busy playing wedding planner. We deserve something too. Gasps erupted in the room. One elderly aunt covered her mouth. A cousin shook her head. Friends began whispering. Their mother stood frozen, her lips pressed tight. Kayla turned ghost white. Then Daniel pulled up the location history from the same night, showing the device used to access Emily's account was logged into from their mother's house. The date? 2 days before the wedding. The same night they had all gathered for dinner and toasted family forever. I didn't think you'd go this far, Emily whispered, looking at them both. Her voice was barely audible, but in the stunned silence, every word landed like a weight. Kayla tried to interject, but Daniel simply raised his hand again. We're not done. He tapped the screen one final time, showing a message their mother had sent, one Emily had never seen. Emily thinks she's better than us just because she married rich. Let's remind her she's still one of us and that we made her. Silence. Dead silence. That's when the shift happened. The polite smiles from guests twisted into frowns. A few people backed away from Kayla. Someone turned off the music altogether. The celebratory air had thickened into something sour and cold. You could have asked me, Emily said softly. I would have given it to you, but you stole and lied, and then tried to make me feel crazy for noticing. Their mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. You brought this humiliation on yourself. No, Daniel said. You did that when you hit your daughter in front of 100 people, when you called her a liar, when you stole her money and expected her to stay quiet. This wasn't vengeance. This was truth aired publicly. Not with screaming, but with evidence, with undeniable facts. The kind of truth that doesn't need to shout because it already echoes louder than any lie. And for once, Emily didn't feel crazy. She felt free. Emily stood quietly near the floral arch, her fingers unconsciously brushing the outline of the red mark, still tingling on her cheek. But the real pain wasn't from the slap. It was from everything it represented. The memories hit her all at once, like a dam cracking wide open. She'd always been the dependable one, the one who understood when they didn't have enough, the daughter who loaned her first college paycheck to help cover Kayla's prom dress, the one who worked double shifts in college, not because she was asked to, but because she had been raised to feel it was her role. Her parents didn't say thank you back then. They said things like, you're so good with money, or, Kayla really needed that. And she believed them. She wore that invisible badge of provider like it was something to be proud of. She thought giving made her worthy. That if she kept helping, kept saying yes, they'd eventually see her, not just as a wallet, but as a daughter. But the pattern never stopped. After she landed her first real job, it was her who paid for their overdue rent. When Kayla wanted to start a small business, Emily funded the inventory and watched as the whole thing fell apart with zero accountability. She even paid off her father's car loan when he hinted he might lose it. Never once was it presented as optional, always as expectation, wrapped in guilt. If she ever hesitated, her mother's disappointed sighs or Kayla's passive-aggressive silence would do the trick. And yet, the love remained one-sided. The moment she started setting boundaries, like not paying for Kayla's third vacation in a year, she became selfish. Now, looking back, she didn't feel anger. Not anymore. She felt clarity. They hadn't just stolen $19,000. They had stolen years, her sense of security, her ability to say no without shame, her rightful place in the family as someone loved, not used. The truth was, Emily had never really been the daughter. She had been the bank, and now the bank was closed. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but her hands were steady. She looked around at the guests in the room, their shocked faces frozen in place. Some were still processing what had just been revealed. Others were too uncomfortable to look her in the eye. The weight of the moment hung in the air like thick smoke. Her mother's face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief and shame. Kayla, once so confident, now stood in the background, looking smaller than Emily had ever seen her. They both had expected her to crumble, to beg for answers, to fall into the chaos they had created. But Emily wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. She straightened her back, glanced at her husband, his jaw clenched, eyes seething but calm. He had stayed quiet through the revelation, letting the evidence speak for itself. Emily could see his fury underneath, but he didn't need to say another word. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice even. "I'm sure you all have your own opinions now. I trust you'll make the right choices moving forward." The silence in the room was deafening as she walked across the room to grab her purse from the table. Her fingers didn't shake, but the cold rush of finality washed over her. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her worth, her life. Turning to her mother, who had not moved, Emily took a step closer. "I'm done funding my own disrespect," she said, her voice unwavering. The words hung in the air like a final blow. They were the words her mother had never expected her to speak. They were the words that, in that moment, shifted everything. She didn't wait for her mother to respond. She didn't need to. Her husband stood up beside her, his presence a silent but powerful declaration of their unity. He gave Emily a nod, and without another glance, they walked toward the door. But before she stepped out, Emily stopped for a moment at the threshold. She turned to face her family one last time, her emotions a quiet storm within her. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "And you won't get another chance to steal from me." With those words, she stepped out of the house that had once been her home, her mother's house, the place where she had been raised to believe that giving and giving was the price of love. The moment she crossed that threshold, everything changed. No more guilt, no more excuses, no more being the family's ATM. Her husband followed her out, closing the door behind them, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a weight lift off her chest. The world outside felt different, bigger, freer. As they walked toward the car, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. They had severed ties, legally, financially, emotionally, and there would be no going back. A year had passed since the wedding, a year full of change, growth, and a newfound peace that Emily hadn't thought possible. It was as if everything that had once weighed her down had been lifted, piece by piece, leaving only space for the life she had always wanted. The business she'd started after cutting ties with her family had flourished beyond her expectations. Her professional life was thriving, and she was finally able to build something on her own terms. No more family demands, no more guilt trips. Emily had created a space where she was the priority, where her value wasn't tied to her ability to give. Her husband, always her rock, had been there every step of the way, and together they had built a future they both could be proud of. There was even more joy on the horizon. Emily's pregnancy was something she cherished deeply, a symbol of the family she had always wanted, a family built on love, respect, and mutual care. It was a life she could never have imagined when she was still caught in the web of her mother's manipulation. Meanwhile, her mother and sister had fallen into a steady spiral. The business they had relied on to sustain themselves had crumbled. The lavish lifestyle they had enjoyed, built on Emily's hard-earned money, had evaporated. Her mother, once a figure of authority and control, was now struggling to make ends meet. Her sister, too, found herself in a financial mess, with no safety net to fall back on. Emily's absence had left a void, but it wasn't the void they had expected. One afternoon, as Emily sat in her sunlit office, she noticed her phone buzzing with a number she hadn't seen in months. It was her mother. Her fingers hovered over the screen. The familiar pang of anger didn't come, though. There was no rush of emotion, no desire to pick up and lash out. Instead, there was just a quiet, calm sense of finality. She let it ring out. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again, a message. "Emily, I've made a mistake. We need your help. Please, I don't know what to do. Please, just help us." Emily read the message, but the words didn't sting. She didn't feel an urge to call back, to fix things, to rescue them from the mess they had created. She had spent too long being the one who was asked to help, the one expected to bail them out, to be the constant savior. But that wasn't her anymore. She put the phone down gently and walked over to the window, staring out at the life she had built. It wasn't just the business or the baby on the way, it was the peace. It was the clarity that came with knowing her worth, her boundaries, and the fact that they were untouchable now. The next morning, Emily replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I wish you well." The phone call that had once filled her with dread now left her calm. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about boundaries. Healthy ones. Ones that protected her from the emotional turmoil her family had once dragged her into. She knew her limits now, and she wouldn't apologize for them. As the weeks went by, her mother and sister never reached out again. But it didn't matter. Emily was finally free. It wasn't the end they had hoped for, but it was the end Emily needed.